Okay. Well, welcome everyone. The National Council for Science and the Environment presents Working with the Encyclopedia of Earth and the CAMEL portal on climate change education. I am Andy Jorgensen, a senior fellow at NCSC, but my home is in the Department of Chemistry at the University of Toledo. This project is, we're in our third year, and we're funded by the National Science Foundation. I'm going to give a brief overview of both the encyclopedia, which is about 6 years old, and CAMEL, which is only about 1 year old, and show you what resources are available and give a general quick tour, so it's just the first 5 minutes or so. Then I'll go right to our presenter for today. The Encyclopedia of Earth is a peer-reviewed online encyclopedia on all things related to the environment, freely available to the public. It is wiki-based, parallel to Wikipedia, except for that key point of peer-reviewed and peers' names are indicated. Ginny, it sounds like some of the phones are not muted. Thank you. If you have a phone, please mute with *6. Extensive and expanding. It has 1,400 contributors, almost 8,000 items, including 300+ videos. Articles, collections, photos, really building up the photo galleries these days. And anyone who's a registered user, and there's no cost involved in being a registered user, can post comments about the articles. We find that very useful to develop a communication between users and the authors. Portals, of which Encyclopedia Earth is one portal, but portal more generally is an online way to connect content to individuals. They are dynamic and customizable. We use a particular template that you'll see. They easily integrate Encyclopedia of Earth articles into your website. So any of those almost 8,000 items can show up on a website that you create as your own portal, and there's no charge for this as long as our funding continues. Trinity is the software company behind. You may see that name on some of the pages. And CAMEL is a specific portal of climate change education. It has most of Encyclopedia of Earth's climate change collection, but additional things, particularly educational components, more than just background articles. Okay, the CAMEL portal, what's available is about 800 entries. We might have broken 800, of which 500+ are peer-reviewed articles from the Encyclopedia of Earth, and 300 of which are educational articles that users have posted. And it's clearly marked which are peer-reviewed by the title of Encyclopedia of Earth. There are background articles, news links, and websites, but particularly emphasizing the educational aspects. We have full syllabi, exercises, PowerPoints, and again, everything on CAMEL is freely available at no charge, no limitation, anything that's published. I mean, authors can have draft versions that are not yet available. But once it's published, available to everyone. After you join CAMEL, and I'll show you how easy that is, and I know most of you are members, but I'll just spend a short time. As a member of CAMEL, which is parallel but different than the Encyclopedia of Earth, you can submit comments and questions. Please mute your phone, participants, *6, and Jenny, can you mute those that are not yet muted manually? You can post an article, a video, news, or curriculum resource. These are a very straightforward way to do that. And there's a template that makes this easy, which has categories which you like to fill in, including the how long it takes to go through the educational unit, what grade, what age level, beginning college, advanced college. And as I say, you can create your own sub-website, which can include anything from the Encyclopedia of Earth or CAMEL. And your website that you create, which has this material mirrored, you can make that private if you like, just for your class or just for your colleagues. Here are some of our institutional partners, major universities of the PIs and co-PIs, as well as national organizations that have been part of this development. Okay, I'm going to jump out of that and go to the website. I'm actually going to look at just momentarily. This is the Encyclopedia of Earth website, and this is the taxonomy for finding various articles in the encyclopedia. And as you can see, climate change is one of the major items, but most of the things from here are in CAMEL. Jumping to the CAMEL website, CAMEL stands for Climate Adaptation, Mitigation, and E-Learning. It is a product of the National Council for Science and Environment, Council of Environmental Deans, funded by NSF. And of course, here's our direct link to the Encyclopedia of Earth. And the American Indian Higher Education Consortium is one of our partners. Okay, we're still having problems of not muting. Jenny, can you mute any of those phones that are not yet muted?
Yeah, that's coming from Robert Wingfield. Robert, if you can mute yourself, please.
*6. Okay, there's more noise than you might think on these lines. So this is the home page for CAMEL. It has a general taxonomy of climate change causes, which have subtopics, consequences, solutions, and actions. And that is one way to search through the resources. But another way is to click on one of our top links here, the topic index. And via the topic index, you'll see there are approximately 200 topics, subtopics, and subtopics. And clicking on any one of these brings you to all the resources, which of the 800 resources are related to this. So if you go on water here, you'll see a series of them. Going back to the home page, instead of by topic, if you want to search by type of category, so for example, the syllabi, click on syllabi, and you'll see the syllabi that people have loaded. And along the left, there are subcategories of syllabi, those that are for college, those that are professional graduate, those that have alternate fuels, etc. So a pretty standard search route. But you can also search by keyword, just putting that in, a keyword or author. Maybe a good place to start here is the short 5-minute video that covers the things that I'm covering now in about 1 minute, and you can watch it and stop it and listen to it. Step 1, invited step 1 here is the topic index you already saw. Step 2 is joining CAMEL, and forgive me those of you who are already members, but if you clicked here, there's a very simple application and you will become a member, and you'll be able to post items, no cost. And the third, add a resource. Once you're a member, you can add a resource. You do need to be a member to add a resource, and that gets reviewed just in a cursory fashion to put up because this is a live learning community. If you're in a particular article and you want to know whether it comes from the Encyclopedia of Earth or not, I'm just doing this randomly. No, I know a better way to do this. When I go to article, you'll be able to see the 500+ articles are from the Encyclopedia of Earth. You'll see republished from. Anything with this republished sign indicates it is peer-reviewed, has the author's name and the topic editor, and each of them has a little link to get you back to the CAMEL home page for this. There are more explicit steps for creating your own website through the Educator's Toolbox. That's not the topic of today, but I or one of the other co-PIs on the project would be happy to help you start that. Okay, so I am ready to pass the ball to Mike. Mike, you ready for that?
I'm ready.
Okay, let me find you on my list here. We got quite a number of people. There we go. And remember to share your desktop. There will be time for questions at the end. And those on can use the chat box that will be monitored during the talk. I am Andy Jorgensen. To remind you, you can send me a chat. And let me remind you that this presentation is being recorded. You'll be able to go back to it later. Take it away, Mike.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Can you see my desktop?
Yes, I can.
Great. Okay, great. Thanks, Andy, and thanks to everyone for joining me this afternoon. And really, the CAMEL resource is pretty awesome. So I'm glad to be a part of it. Today I'm going to talk about the food and climate change course that I taught here at Chatham University last fall. So my name is Mike Finewood. I'm a professor here in the School of Sustainability and the Environment. Excuse me. Oh. Okay, hold on 1 second. Okay, so just briefly, my plan today is talk for about 15-20 minutes. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about my background because it gives you a good sense of how I structured the course and why I structured it that way. And I want to talk a little bit about our program because that also helps to make sense of the course the way it is and the way it's probably going to evolve. Then we'll get into the course itself that I taught last fall. I'll talk about the structure of the course. I want to talk about what worked and reflect on some of the student responses from the evaluations to let you see kind of where they're coming from. And then I want to show you some critiques and some of the changes I anticipate making when I teach it in 2012. I'll sum up by making a couple connections to some of the material that's on the CAMEL site, and then we can open it up for questions. So I'm a human geographer and political ecologist. I got my degree from the University of South Carolina. My research focuses on the human dimensions of environmental change, and again, you'll see that really thread through the syllabus itself. I've worked, when I was in South Carolina, a lot on coastal development and amenity migration, looking at some of the social and ecological impacts of urbanization along the coast. More recently, as I've moved to Pittsburgh, I've gotten involved in water governance, looking at some of the CSO issues, combined sewer overflow issues here in Pittsburgh, as well as energy production, and that's related to some of the hydraulic fracturing that's going on around here, which it seems is almost impossible to avoid. You can see really that each of these projects clearly have, they touch climate change issues, but I just want to point out that I'm not necessarily a climate change scientist. And again, I think that'll be reflected in how I approach this course and some of the changes that I think I made. Although I guess I should say that I did do some sea level rise work in Hampton Roads, Virginia, but that was somewhat brief. So here at Chatham, we've recently started the School of Sustainability and the Environment. It's been around for a couple years now. We're currently offering a master's in food studies, and then in the fall we'll be bringing in our first cohort of sustainability students. You can see that part of our mission is to promote through education, research, and outreach a transdisciplinary systems-based approach to sustainability. That transdisciplinary part is key because we're really trying to reach a wide range of students and give them a wide set, a varied set of tools for thinking about environmental issues today and in the near future. And again, I think that'll really be reflected throughout the course. But the key thing is the backgrounds of these students. They really do come from a wide range of backgrounds with a very wide range of interests. So we're thinking hard about how we can, reach all of these students and get across the things that we want to get across. So when we think of when we were putting when Dave Hosenthal's and I were putting this course together last fall, we were thinking about what we wanted out of this course, and the overarching goal is to think about the sort of reciprocal relationship between climate change and food systems, how food production and consumption impacts climate, and then how climate change impacts how we produce and consume food. I think from my point of view, we really ended up thinking a lot about how climate impacts food production and consumption. So you might think of this more as maybe a little less environmental science and a little more environmental studies. The course, I think, would probably more reflective of a climate and society course. And I'll come back to that in a little bit, but I think it's important to be thinking about that now. The structure itself was probably familiar to most of you. It was a seminar-style course, like other graduate level courses that I've taken and have taught. It was heavy on the writing side. We had students lead particular classes, and we did a lot of reading around particular topics each week. As far as topics go, there really weren't a lot of other courses that I could find that were similar to this. I mean, different bits and pieces that I drew on. And of course, that was where the CAMEL website was really invaluable. But in the first couple of weeks, Dr. Hossenthal came in and gave a talk about climate, a sort of long view bit on climate. And we talked about some of the anthropogenic forcings of climate change. And then in about week 2, we really got into thinking about the quote-unquote climate change debate, climate skepticism. And again, I'll come to that, why that became so prominent within the course here in a minute. But we also, so other topics that we covered throughout the rest of the course, we thought a lot about risk, uncertainty, vulnerability, adaptive capacity, and adaptation. And then from my background in development and political ecology, we thought a lot, or talked a lot about small-scale community, food security, food production. We looked at a lot of less developed countries and those communities and what climate change would mean to them, as well as thinking about it in the sort of development frame of thinking, you know, policies and how those policies sort of play out on the ground, who makes decisions, costs and benefits, and then as a geographer, thinking a lot about unevenness, how certain things may happen in one place and reflect, that may happen differently in another place, and really thinking about unevenness, the unevenness of geography. So the students, as I mentioned, have a pretty wide range of backgrounds. Last fall, they were just food studies students, but as I mentioned, we have our first cohort coming in this fall of sustainability students. And if you collectively look at those backgrounds, they're really all over the map, which is exciting, but also a bit of a challenge. We had students with nutrition backgrounds, communications backgrounds, business backgrounds, some humanities backgrounds, not very many with strong science backgrounds. And as I was working with them in those first couple of weeks and talking to them about what they wanted out of this course, what their expectations were, their desires for the course, what really emerged is they were reflecting on these experiences they had, perhaps that we all have with family members or friends or people in the community who are skeptical, and what they wanted was to have reasoned conversations where they felt sort of empowered to talk about climate change and sort of lay out what they felt were the key parts to make their case, or make the case for the anthropogenic forcing side of the conversation. Again, I think that's something that maybe we all deal with. You know, we've got a family member or something like that, and this was really key to what they wanted. And I'll come to that. Can everybody make sure that their audio?
Tim Benedict, that's you. If you can mute yourself, Tim Benedict.
Okay, thanks, Tim, and thanks, Andy. So again, I think what I'm trying to emphasize here is that there was really a lot going on in terms of what I sort of thought the course was going to look like in the beginning, and then how it sort of changed over time. And that was really reflective of these variety of backgrounds that the students had. I don't want to say not having a strength in environmental science, but certainly not a lot of experience. And really wanting to get the sort of information and use that in their everyday experience with the people they work with the people in their families, etc. So, oops, okay. So here, I just want to think a little bit about what worked out of all that. I think we did a really good job of providing students with the substance, with the information for for understanding climate change impacts on food production and society, and vice versa. As I mentioned before, it was probably a little bit lighter on the science side and stronger on the environmental studies side, but this was really, I think, what the students wanted out of this class. So more on thinking about climate change impacts on food production and society. They also wanted to, and we talked a lot about the climate change debate, where we would, literally students would come in and say, well, what about this? Or I heard this, and how do we talk about that? I don't think it wasn't that students didn't know. It was more that the real practice of sitting in there and having that conversation gave them, I think, the confidence and the wherewithal to be able to sort of go back to those conversations and say, encounter some of those really what are talking point kind of arguments that I'm sure we're all relatively familiar with at this point. Another thing I think worked really well was I think we developed a pretty solid understanding of small-scale food production in less developed countries. Again, this is coming from my background and really me going out and looking for literature in journals that I was familiar with. But what was interesting here is even though we were really looking at these cases that were in other countries or what have you in other regions of the planet, this really resonated with the students, the food studies students who were working here, who might be working with small scale farmers in our region or whatever sort of research they were doing. So that was sort of an interesting translation, and for those of you that follow the political ecology literature, that's certainly a field of political ecology, is thinking about how context in different places apply to us here in the global north. And on the last bullet point here, this was a sort of interesting outcome of this book. First we read Frances Moore Lepay's book from the 70s, Diet for a Small Planet, which is really about energy and how much energy goes into food production. Anna Lepay is her daughter, who wrote Diet for a Hot Planet, which is a bit of more popular writing thinking about climate change. What was interesting about it was the students didn't really like the book. I didn't have any particular problem with it. I thought it was decent. Well, I thought it was pretty good, actually. Now, these are food studies students, so they tend to be a little bit more critical of food writing in general. And they kind of didn't like the sort of anecdotal arguments that she used, some of the narratives that she used. They felt like it was sort of intellectually weak. But what it really gave was a great opportunity to critique popular writing, to think about something, the goal of Anna Lepay was to reach a very broad audience and a good opportunity to see that, and then particularly as we read this book later on in the semester, after they sort of developed a critical thinking framework, it gave them a real opportunity to critique some things that were probably more generally read. So as I said, I wanted to show you some of the student responses. These were the feedback from the evaluation, but I think there's some value in it, and just kind of seeing, what they liked or what they gained from the course and what they found was useful. And I should have probably noted this earlier, but these are 3 responses out of 6. So there was only 6 students in the class. I anticipated it would be a bit larger next fall, but it's a pretty small sample size, obviously, and then, of course, I've only taught the class once, so you'll have to take it for what it's worth. But you could see that this ability to mobilize knowledge was very important to them, and that came up in all of the evaluations. But here I've just underlined a couple where they talked about wanting to be able to, and now being able to, have informed conversations with others about climate change. They want to be able to confidently express their opinions. Here they're talking more clearly. I guess I'm sort of putting words in their mouth, but hopefully the sentiment is still the same. And then on this bottom one you see, I think following within this theme, this deeper understanding of climate change, right? But key to that is how it's mobilized in these everyday experiences that students have. And I've highlighted some different parts of the same three references, again, just so you can see this was clearly very important to me, thinking about political ecology and geography. One was thinking about consumption. That was, I suppose, maybe it's not intuitive. It's sort of intuitive to me, but maybe not to everybody else, that that food really sort of falls under this realm of environmental studies, but I don't think that's as obvious, maybe, or wasn't as obvious. So linking together their sort of consumption behavior and choices and decision making to thinking about sort of costs and benefits, and you see that sort of reflected in this bottom statement where we talk about we will not all experience climate change in the same way. Really what we're talking about is that it's not just location or region or what have you, but there's politics, economics, and social issues that also play into thinking about impacts from climate change. So just reflecting on these, I felt like there was certainly something very productive came out of that, and again, sort of something that was also very important to me as a political ecologist and geographer. So just to follow on that and think about critiques, I wanted to kind of lay these out. I've touched on some of them already, but make them more explicit here. So if any of you are considering this, I should have noted that my syllabus is up on the CAMEL site, and I will be putting the new one on the CAMEL site probably somewhere in August. And I would it'd be great to get feedback. But what you're seeing here in this critique side is how I'm thinking about changing the old syllabus and what I'm going to do with the new syllabus coming this fall. So I think primarily I need to sort of adjust my expectations of incoming students and think more about the science behind climate change. And I haven't read these two books, the Henson book and the Manning-Kump book, but they have gotten pretty good reviews, and I should have them coming in this week. But I'm going to have the students read one of these two books. And my hope is not just that it will sort of provide some information for them, but then it'll also sort of have a primer that they can just keep on their shelf and go to if they ever have questions somewhere down the road. Another critique, I think, and again, this is probably more reflective of my background than anything else, is that I think I focused too much on development. We didn't really spend a lot of time thinking as much time thinking about some of the communities here in the global north. I think this might even be a region for more research. A lot of the students are thinking about sustainable ag. They're working with sort of small-scale, sustainable or organic agriculturalists, farmers in the region. And I think there's a lot of space there for, again, both in the class and probably on the research side of things, is thinking about adaptation to climate change here in the global north. On the policy side of things, I didn't include as much policy, and these are just some examples that I just kind of jotted down. In reading, as I'm sure many of you have read some of this stuff, sometimes it can be kind of dry, but I think there's some real value in really engaging with this stuff. And I think if I'm going to do it, I am going to do it. When I do it, it's going to be more near the end of the course, so that they will have really developed a stronger critical thinking framework that we can really go after some of these policy papers, white papers, what have you, at that point in the course. Another bit that I think I could have addressed more was thinking about some of the more critical concepts of race, class, gender, and ethnicity. For example, there were at least 2 students in the class who were interested in environmental justice issues and Native American communities. Not that I excluded this for any particular reason, and if you look at the syllabus, you'll see that I do have some stuff on gender, but certainly there's room for more. And finally, I think I'd like to start moving beyond the seminar format. This isn't to say that I'm unhappy with the seminar format, so the majority of the class will probably still have those sort of focused topics by week where we come in and really engage in those. But I think just after having watched Arnold's Climate Change in One module and Patrick and Stephanie's Climate Challenge game, I think there's a lot of room for using some of those resources and integrating them into the class. And I think also I'd like to maybe think about ways to get students to participate more on the CAMEL website. Last fall, I had them write encyclopedia entries. I think it was cool. It had some value to them. It was something they could put on their CV or resumes. But along those same lines, I could see some sort of participation or another on the website. So on that note, I'd also mention that it would be great if anybody was interested or wanted to add comments or ask me questions or provide critiques. I'd be happy to hear them about the syllabus and kind of the plans for it as it evolves over time. I'd like to continue uploading the syllabus, particularly as we plan on teaching it every fall. So with that, I'll say thanks, and I know that we have a way of doing some feedback if anybody has any questions. And of course, if you want to hit me up off list, you can shoot me an email. That's fine too. So
thank you, Mike. This is Andy Jorgensen jumping back in. Appreciate a very clear presentation of real in the classroom use. And I appreciate the comment that you posted the syllabus up on CAMEL. So it was one of the ones when I reviewed the list of syllabus we had. Let me first say, and we're inviting questions now, you're welcome to send the questions to me, Andy Jorgensen, or Ginny Brown, who's the host for this. Her name comes up first, or directly to Mike, and we'll see it in the chat box. You will get within a day or two, you'll get a very short survey. I mean, very, very short. It will take you less than 5 minutes to complete. We appreciate if you send it back to us. This is all an evolving process here. And in addition to keep our funders happy, but as well, because we want to make these webinars as good as we can, we'd like to get your feedback. This is a good time to remind you that our last webinar of this series is next week, and you can sign up for it through the link on the home page of CAMEL. Okay, does anyone have a question they'd like to type in the chat box? Ginny, are you seeing anything coming up?
Yes. Okay, you should have one, Andy.
Okay, Fred is saying the peer-reviewed literature in education, ecology, agriculture, health, medicine, social science are not robust inventories. Observation number 1, great opportunities for publishing in the peer-reviewed literature. Observation number 2, tremendous resource material, some a bit dated, over a full spectrum of grade levels from elementary to higher education. Is CAMEL participating with the National Science Digital Library? That's a very good question. I'm afraid I'm not the best one to answer the last question. Mike, do you want to take on any of the first parts of those, the publishing in the primary literature?
Is that in relation to the assignment, or?
Well, I think he means the topics. Fred, correct me if I'm wrong. He's saying peer-reviewed education, literature in education, ecology, agriculture, health, medicine, social science are not robust inventory. So I think he's saying what is in CAMEL does not have as much of the primary literature references as would be useful.
Right. I mean, you know, there's a lot out there. I think in terms of putting together the syllabus itself, you know, there was so much. I mean, I just had this huge list, and I was contacting other people. So, I mean, I think what you're seeing is just a reflection of trying to put together a syllabus after doing it the first time. And I'm hoping that what you'll see the next time I put up will be much stronger. It'll probably have some more recent lit. You know, I think the bottom line, and I was really trying to just have a breadth in there. I wanted to have some popular writings. You'll see some stuff from the New York Times, for example, some stuff from Wired magazine, and I wanted to have some peer-reviewed literature. And you know, that's just something that's probably going to evolve over time. I hope that's answering that question. I'm not.
I think the question may be referring more broadly to CAMEL, what's in CAMEL, and we actually just today in our CAMEL leadership call looked at where CAMEL was a year ago. It's really come very far in a year, but there's still a long way to go, particularly in the area that Fred is suggesting. We have two other questions. Can you read them there, Michael, as they show up on your screen? Do you consider placing the issue of food security as the basis for this topic, as this has the most material internationally under this heading? Food security.
Yeah, food security here in our program is you know, it's a pretty broad topic. I think so. It wasn't something that I didn't consider. I think it's more that food security was already pretty well laced within almost everything that we discussed, and that's probably just more of a reflection of being, you know, food studies students. They talked a lot about, we thought a lot about, and discussed food security. So I think if I was in a different program, I would probably have done that. But considering it was here, and again, considering this was the first round of doing this course, that's what you're seeing. But maybe now in hindsight, and actually with this question, it does make a lot of sense. I mean, that food security should be probably one of the more primary pieces.
Next one, have you used research data on the impact of climate change on food production in third world countries like Africa and Bangladesh?
I'm sorry, I don't think I'm seeing the same question as you are.
Well, it may be above the one you're saying. It was from Ginny. Have you used some research data on the impact of climate change on food production in third world countries like Africa and Bangladesh? So did your course include third world impacts?
Yes. As a matter of fact, that's what I was trying to reflect on a little bit earlier, that a lot of the course, we looked at less developed we looked at a lot of less developed regions of the world, and looked very specifically at small-scale communities and thought about them in the context of really political economy and political ecology, right? So thinking about policies and how policies sort of played out on the ground, who the decision makers were, who made the policies. We talked about things like food aid. And it's not to say that I didn't find a lot of value in that, but I felt like we had focused too much on that. What I wanted to do, what I want to try and do more of this time is think about how those same sort of research themes or topics play out not only in less developed regions of the planet, but also in the U.S., as we are sort of geographically uneven as well, or maybe not just the U.S., but more developed countries. So I wanted to do that because a lot of these women that were in my class, excuse me, women and men that were in my class and are going to be in the class are working with farmers here in the U.S. And a lot of this is about them having those conversations with those farmers. So I think we did a good job, and I think you'll see that if you look at the syllabus, we did a good job of looking at those less developed regions, but I want to spend a little more time on more developed regions with some of the same issues.
Even a whole semester has limits in time, doesn't it?
That's true. That's true. I mean, this course could probably, I mean, it could be indefinite. I mean, that was a real challenge putting this course together, was just trying to find some unifying topics to write about. I see another topic here that says 2 years ago, Andy, do you mind if I read this?
No, go, please. I was going to suggest you do that.
2 years ago, the CO2 footprint of foods and beverages was a very hot topic among Al Gore's cadre of climate change presenters. This is from Fred Stoss, and he was one of them. There have been arguments calling for a more rigorous overview of the CO2 eating habits in the developed world in addition to food supply issues and how much CO2 is for in lesser developed regions. And that's not really framed as a question, but I think I see, or hopefully I see, Fred, where you're going there. And that is really where I think geography came in and thinking about consumption. So we did talk a bit about consumption habits, and then, you know, we tried to make connections between sort of policy level decision making, whose interests were being protected. And that very clearly played out. I didn't use, okay, great, Fred, thanks. So I think that was very valuable, because that, if you look back to thinking about what one of the feedback comments of the students was, it was thinking about consumption and thinking about how their consumption habits might be having impacts on people, maybe a few degrees of separation, or maybe not even a few degrees of separation, but people in other places in sort of uneven ways. That's a pretty key takeaway, I think, from the course, at least the iteration from last fall, was that, even if the worst case scenario happens, not everybody is going to suffer. That some people will suffer more than others. And maybe that goes back to the food security question that came up a little bit earlier. But it was getting students to thinking about the sort of variety of potential outcomes from climate change. I hope that addresses that, Fred. Were there some more questions, Andy?
I'm not seeing any other questions that people want to send. This is the time to remind you you'll be getting a survey. Please respond it. If you're not yet a member of CAMEL, please do join. Quite easy.
I see.
Question right there.
Yeah, I see just a comment from Fred that he has a slide in his presentations how much. Oh, I see. CO2 is needed to produce a potato chip. Okay. Yeah, I guess I don't really know how to answer that question, but.
Well, he's suggesting this is the type of data we need, and I'd say here, yes, absolutely. We don't think about these things. I give many public talks, and I do quote have a figure, an animated figure that shows per pound of different types of meat. Chicken I normalize it to 1, and then put lamb and pork, which is about 3.7 something if I recall, and beef is 7 times, so 7 times as much CO2 per pound of beef compared to chicken. And people realize there's a difference, but don't realize how great this difference is. And I do an animated bar graph to really grab their attention.
I think that if although I won't have the students read it again, you might consider taking a look at Frances Moore Lepay's book, Diet for a Small Planet. She talks a lot more about energy, how much energy it takes. But there's a lot of really good info in there, even if you just wanted to draw out some pieces. And what makes it so shocking, I suppose, is that it's still relevant now 30 years later. So some info definitely in there, but perhaps to Fred's point, this is really an opportunity for people to add more content to the CAMEL website.
And just like, of course, these food packages do have calorie and other nutritional count, because by federal law, people woke up to the information that what they're eating really had some of the stuff they didn't want, and maybe a lot of good stuff as well. They were informed by these labels, even though it was greatly resisted, I think, by the food industry. Now, if we had some more information about what the real investment, or what the real cost, shall we say, in CO2 emissions, we can be making some informed choices.
Right.
Thank you, Fred,
right.
for those questions. Any other questions from members of the group? I think we've had almost 50 on the call today. This is one of our largest webinars ever. Oh, do you see that question there?
Yeah. I think, Marilee, to put this in context, when we read Anna LePay's book, it was at the end of the semester, and we had been reading, a lot of academic literature. And by the time they'd gotten to Anna LePay, I think they just felt like she was not treating the issue at a very intellectual level, that it was just more, she used kind of anecdotes and kind of used these narratives that, by that time the students were very critical of. Maybe saying they didn't like the LePay book was a little harsh, but they didn't feel like it did the work that it set out to do. Maybe that's a better way to put it. Yeah, I think you're right. Marilee comments that students use anecdotal info, and that is certainly true. But we all do, I suppose, to agree. I don't want to just lay this at the feet of students, but I think the real I wouldn't look at that really as a negative. I saw that as a real positive, that they were taking some popular writing and really taking it to task and really thinking about its true value in producing knowledge. And so, Marilee, my comment to that would be, if you're, I'm still going to have the students read that book, and for the same reason as I mentioned earlier, that this is what's out there, and this is how people get information. So, if they like it or don't like it, that's just the way it is. Okay.
You saw Marilee's comment. Let me reply to what she, if I'm pronouncing it, would be Tedis on how to reach or educate high school students. I have a PowerPoint that includes some of the kind of typical images of temperature change over time, although I reveal it only a year at a time for a while, and they're as well as changes in Greenland and the Arctic ice cap, and then I have this slide, as I say, about food. I have another slide about how much CO2 is produced by light bulbs, and I use different size containers, how many aluminum cans recycled. This is a 50 or 60 slide talk that I give, and I've had no problem having high school teachers invite me to come and give this talk. Give it in an environmental science class. Also, some of my colleagues in teaching college classes to non-science majors, and I do it with clickers, personal response devices, and I ask the students first some facts, how much do they know about the facts, and then afterwards, are they willing to make changes? Are they supportive of nuclear power? I don't talk too much about nuclear power, but I give them choices. So I think if you put together a talk, you'll find a ready audience in your area high school science teachers. Okay.
There's a question here about what books I would recommend on food and climate change. I have to admit that outside of the two LePay books, that I used almost exclusively academic and some journalism, but I hope to try to use more investigative journalism.
Two books. Our David Blockstein, one of our leaders of this project, has a book on solutions to climate change. If you just search on his name, Blockstein, on Camel, you will find actually excerpts from the book that are, actually maybe even all of the book is posted up online. That's one that I'm going to plan to use in a course to create on solutions to climate change. That's one of the emphasis of Camel is not just
Andy,
characterizing.
Just to mention, this is David. It's not just about solutions. It really lays out the science about climate change and energy use as well.
And right from the author there, you heard a summary of the book, so that's one. And all of it's available on Camel, David, or a large part of it?
No, not all of it is available on Camel. It's available from Island Press, Climate Change, Science, and Solutions. And there are pieces of it that are on Camel, and there are also online components of the book.
Great. So look for it on Camel. And also Arnold Bloom, one of the leaders of the group, has has a book for in the general interest introductory college level climate change book. There are several excerpts of it. So Arnold Bloom, who was the presenter a few weeks ago on climate change and wine, again, you can find that on Camel and get his book. As you say, David's book is a paperback available relatively inexpensively from Island Press. Okay, and let's see, who's got the screen now? Is that Ginny? Oh, this is from, that's something that Fred sent?
Yeah, I think Fred was saying, if you can still see my screen.
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay, yeah, this is the link that Fred just sent, which might have something else there. And I feel like I've been too harsh on the LePay book. That's a good book, I think, for students. It's very accessible. There's lots in there to think about. But otherwise, I personally have not found a lot of books specifically on food and climate change. A lot of it is really just navigating different books or looking for specific chapters. There was a book recently, or in 2009, called Anthropology in Climate Change, I believe, that had a couple chapters on it. Nothing is really coming out off the top of my head, but I'm sure they're around. You just got to kind of find your way through them.
Since you have the screen, Michael, would you go to Camel and type in David's name so you can do a link to the book?
Sure.
So if you, under the search there, to the medium right there, type in his last name and you should be able to find one of the,
Black or Block?
Block, C-K-S-T-E-I-N. There you go, Climate Solutions Consensus, right there.
Looks like
that's one of the chapters, but the top one is probably the better one to start with. Okay. And there's a list of topics.
It looks like this is an accompanying resource, so that's pretty cool. There's a lot of material here. Here's some.
David, is this the right best place to go? Is this the?
It is, yeah. And just to be very accurate here, most of the book was written by Leo Wigman, the.
Down the lower there, right there.
Right, Leo wrote most of it. I did read and edit everything several times, but the credit for the scholarship and the wit is due to Leo, not to me.
And as you see the list of topics as Michael went through it, it's very broad and it covers many things we're talking about.
And you'll also see just from the chapter titles, it's written in a pretty interesting way for this topic. For example, the Dance of the Mice and the Elephants is about the IPCC.
Fred Stoss has also posted in the chat box information about another book. And if you'll search just one other item, Michael, if you search on Bloom, you may come up with some flowers, but Arnold Bloom's book, he has both his educational module, but also excerpts from his book. Let's see. Okay, if you, let's see. Ancient Earth, the First 3 Billion Years, I think that's probably an excerpt from his book. Okay. So if one searches on Bloom, you'll find segments. A large part of his book is in this. If you go to the bottom, I'm not sure he has a reference to the actual ISBN for the book, but much of it's taken from there.
And I will say that if you look at the syllabus, that I did use a lot of Encyclopedia of Earth and Campbell materials
Do you want to click to that? If you just click on, put your name in the search, you'll get, or just click on syllabi. There's not a lot of syllabi. You'll be able to get to your syllabi on Camel. So, yeah, right there. The structure is very good. There you go. So this is a great sharing exercise, and I'm commenting to people that you have a PDF that you can download from him.
Right.
And we'll look forward to the new one for this fall. A great community here. We're all in this together, educating. And this is a field that none of us really were teaching 10 years ago, probably, or at least not too much to a great degree. So it's very, there's all those Camel references. Very
right. So
useful.
And you see, I mean, you could see what I was talking about earlier, that I was trying to sort of set it up for the rest of the semester, but we really ended up focusing a lot on skepticism, and the Yale product stuff was pretty good. There's a comment here that said students should have more exposure on food production and mitigation processes in third world countries. I definitely agree with that, and if you look at the syllabus, you'll see that there is a lot of focus on less developed countries, a lot of focus on less developed countries. But again, this is, go ahead.
I was just going to say we're just about out of time. If anyone has any last questions or comments, now's the time to get them in. Thank you again, and please reply to the survey that you get, and do become a member if you have not done so. Thank you very much, Michael, for a very informative and obviously stimulating presentation. We appreciate it. Thanks, Ginny, for setting this up. And hope to see several of you on the call next week.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye now.